Closing seems to be something that's on the mind of all salespeople and sales managers. How do we get more business closed? In order to do that, we have to ask good questions. We've got to get the information that we need from the customer and make sure that the timeline and the budget and all of those things are going to flow together. So here are some questions that you need to ask every client every time before you can get to the close. The first question is, what is your budget? Important to know. Sometimes people won't disclose that, but if they don't, that's a sign also, and it's a good thing to know. So find out what their budget is for the project, because if it's not going to fit, you can either do some things to help them, incorporate your product or service into their budget, or you can figure out a payment method that might work with their budget, or you can get into their next budget cycle. So always be sure and ask, even though sometimes it's uncomfortable, always make sure and ask what the budget is. Another important thing that a lot of salespeople miss is who else besides yourself will be making the decision. And if you don't know the answer to that question, it can really make the sales process slow and arduous, and oftentimes you won't be able to close the deal. It's important to know all of the different people who will be involved in not only setting the budget and the timeline, but also who's going to be using the product. And so those key decision makers have to understand all of the pieces that you put together to close the deal, not just one person. If you get trapped with one person, you probably won't be able to close. What's the best way to include everyone in the decision-making process? So once you've talked to your contact and you know who the other decision makers are, you can say to them, what's the best way to get all of these people involved? Should we have a conference call? Shall we have another meeting? Shall I introduce myself by email and send them some information? What's the best way to get them involved so they have all of the information that they need? And then make sure you understand the timeline for making the decision and the timeline for implementation. Those can be completely different. Once they've made the decision, they may have to put some other things in place before you can implement the solution that you've got. If that's the case, you've got to know both dates. So always be sure and ask them what their timeline is for making the decision and what the timeline is for implementation. Once you've got that information, you need to understand how your solution meets their needs. If you're not clear on that, they're probably not clear on it either. So you may have to help bring people to consensus. If the solution is meeting their needs and all of the other pieces are right, it will be very easy to close the business. What other solutions have they considered? If I'm the only solution they've considered, that may be as big of a problem as if I have a lot of competitors, because that means they may not fully understand what they're getting into. It's important to know if they have a solution that they can do in-house. Are there competitors? Or is it possible that if they don't choose you, they're going to do absolutely nothing at all? So you've got to know what the other solutions are. It's an important question to ask. And the last thing that you need to know is, when should I get back to you to learn of your decision? So once you've gotten through the sales process, they've gotten the information they need, you've worked with all the different people who are involved in the sale, everything looks really good, just ask, when should I get back to you? Because you don't want to be a pest, you don't want to keep calling them and, what have you decided? But you also have invested a lot of time and energy in this as well, and you do deserve to know that. And so it's a very simple question to ask, but a lot of salespeople are afraid to ask it. When should I get back to you to learn of your decision? If you ask these questions throughout the sales process and get the answers, you will be sure to get the commitment that you need to close the deal. And I can guarantee you that if you don't have all of this information, it will be much harder to close the deal and you might not be able to close it at all.